A nurse with nothing left to lose performed a street-side surgery to save a dying man. She had no idea the man she saved was the only person standing between two cartels and all-out war. In saving his life, she made herself the next target. Her name was Elena Vasquez, a former trauma nurse living in her car, using the last of her supplies to stop a stranger's bleeding on a rainy downtown curb. In that moment, she wasn't a homeless woman. She was a medic, and she had just resuscitated Javier Ruiz, the brother who kept the delicate peace between the Sinaloa and Jalisco cartels. By dawn, they would know her face. The call went out before the ambulance even arrived. A spotter watching from a parked car a block away saw the woman in the soaked hoodie applying pressure to the gunshot wound in Javier Ruiz's abdomen. He saw her rip open a sterile gauze pack from a professional-grade kit. He saw her shout instructions to a panicked bystander to call 911 with specific trauma alerts. This was not random aid. This was triage. The spotter's message was 3 words: civilian medic intervened. Ruiz alive. For Elena, there was no calculation, just instinct honed in 1,000 urban traumas. The man was bleeding out from a through-and-through wound to the lower right quadrant. He was shockingly pale, his pulse a thready flutter under her fingers. She used a makeshift compression bandage from her dwindling stash, her mind running through the checklist. No major artery hit, possible liver nick, risk of sepsis from street gutter contamination. She was so focused on keeping him alive for the next 5 minutes that the 2 black SUVs screeching to the curb barely registered. Men erupted from the vehicles, their movements tactical, efficient. They surrounded her, weapons not pointed but held ready. One, a man with a scar bisecting his eyebrow, knelt opposite her. His eyes went from the patient's face to Elena's working hands. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice low and flat. "I'm keeping him from dying before the EMS gets here," Elena snapped, not looking up. "Put pressure here, now." The order was so absolute, so clinically urgent that the man complied without thought, his large hands replacing hers on the bandage. He barked in Spanish to the others. They formed a perimeter, eyes scanning the rooftops, the alleys. The rain masked the approaching siren. At the hospital, a different kind of protocol took over. Elena was pulled aside as a swarm of trauma team members took Javier Ruiz into surgery. The man with the scar, who introduced himself as Carlos, Javier's head of security, interrogated her in a sterile family waiting room. He wanted her life story in 5 minutes. She gave him the brutal summary: fired nurse, blacklisted, homeless. He checked every detail against a quick phone call, his expression unreadable. 3 hours later, the surgeon emerged. Javier Ruiz was stable. The bullet had missed vital structures by millimeters, but the surgeon was puzzled. The patient's tox screen showed trace elements of an uncommon paralytic agent. It had slowed his metabolism, deepening blood loss and mimicking a more critical state. "Almost like it was designed to make us think he was a goner," the surgeon mused. Elena, who had been silently observing from the corner, spoke up. "Tetrodotoxin, puffer fish venom. It depresses the nervous system, lowers heart and respiratory rates to near undetectable levels." Every head turned to her. Carlos's eyes narrowed. "How do you know that?" "Because I've seen it before," Elena said, the old professional steel back in her voice. "At County, a decade ago, a high-profile patient was brought in DOA. I insisted on deeper tox screens. Found tetrodotoxin. He woke up in the morgue. The case was buried, so was I." The implications hung thick in the air. This wasn't a random hit. Someone had poisoned Javier Ruiz with a drug that simulated death, then shot him to finish the job and make it look like a standard assassination. The attempt was elaborately staged to ensure he never made it to an operating table. When Javier Ruiz woke from anesthesia, his first act was not to ask for water or for his brother. He looked at the faces around his bed, Carlos, 2 other lieutenants, and his voice was a rasp of gravel. "Get the woman, the nurse, only her." Elena was ushered in. Javier Ruiz was a man in his late 40s, with the build of a former soldier and eyes that held a terrifying, weary intelligence. He studied her as Carlos explained what she'd done on the street and what she'd said about the poison. "You recognize the toxin," Javier stated. "I did." "You intervened despite the obvious danger." "He was a patient, that's all." "You have no allegiance. No one paid you to be there." Alina met his gaze, the exhaustion and defiance of the past year plain on her face. "The only thing I was paid tonight was in rainwater, Mr. Ruiz. My allegiance is to the oath I took, even if the system says I'm not allowed to practice it anymore." A long, silent assessment followed. Javier then turned to Carlos. "She stays in the room. You and your men guard the door. No one else enters without my direct say. Not hospital admin, not police, and especially not any of my brother's people until I understand what happened." Carlos looked stricken. "Javier, you can't be serious. We know nothing about her." "I know she saved my life when your security detail failed," Javier said quietly, and the words cut deeper than a shout. "I know she identified the method of the attack. That is more than I know about anyone else in this room right now. She stays." For Alina, the hospital room became a gilded cage. She was given a chair, a blanket, food from the cafeteria. Carlos and his men watched her with a hostility barely veiled by professionalism. She was an unknown variable, a potential plant, a complication. Javier drifted in and out of sleep. In a moment of lucidity, he spoke to her again, his voice weaker. "The piece is fragile. My brother Arturo leads the Sinaloa operation here. I am the bridge, the negotiator with Marco Jalisco's people. We have a truce, for now. This," he gestured weakly to his wound, "this is meant to break it. If I die, Arturo will blame Jalisco. War, hundreds dead, streets running red." Alina understood then the monumental weight of her simple act of stopping bleeding on a curb. She hadn't just saved a man. She had, temporarily, prevented an urban conflict. Later that night, as Javier slept under watch, Alina used the room's private bathroom. As she washed her hands, she heard Carlos's voice, low and tense, just outside the door, speaking in rapid Spanish on the phone. Her Spanish was rusty but medical. She caught only fragments. "The woman knows too much. Ruiz trusts her. The toxin source is compromised. Yes, the package from the coastal lab. Clean it up before the brother arrives tomorrow." The water turned icy on her skin. Package, coastal lab, clean it up. Carlos wasn't just investigating the attack. He was involved in covering its tracks, and she was a loose end that needed cleaning up too. She returned to her chair, her heart hammering against her ribs. Javier Ruiz trusted her to keep him alive from external threats, but the man he trusted to guard the door might be the very threat he needed guarding from. And with the arrival of Arturo Ruiz, the infamous cartel leader, scheduled for the next morning, Alina realized her time and her safety was now measured in hours. The door to the hospital room opened at 6:17 a.m. It wasn't a nurse. Arturo Ruiz filled the frame, his tailored suit seeming to warp the light around him. Two hulking shadows flanked him. His gaze swept past Carlos, past his own men, and locked onto Alina, still hunched in the chair by the window. "You," he said, the word a command. "Outside now." Javier stirred, his voice weak but firm. "Arturo, she stays. She is under my protection." Arturo didn't look at his brother. His eyes, dark as oil, stayed on Alina. "Your protection didn't stop a bullet, Javier. My men will handle this." He snapped his fingers. One of the shadows moved toward Alina. Alina stood, her knees protesting, but she didn't back down. She looked past Arturo to Javier. "If I leave this room, your brother's head of security will ensure I don't reach the end of the hallway." The room froze. Carlos's hand twitched toward his holster. "You lying bitch," he snarled. "Enough," Javier's voice, though pained, cracked with authority. He pushed himself up on his elbows. "Carlos, step away from the door. Arturo, sit. Everyone else, get out." A tense, silent battle passed between the brothers. Finally, Archero gave a minute nod. His two men retreated, pulling a seething Carlos with them. The door closed, leaving the three of them alone. Archero took a chair, his movements deliberately slow, a predator settling in. "Explain," he said, the word directed at Alina. She took a steadying breath, her medical training forcing calm into her voice. "Last night I heard Carlos on the phone. He was speaking about a package from the coastal lab. He said the toxin source was compromised and needed to be cleaned up before you arrived. He referred to me as someone who knows too much. The tetrodotoxin that poisoned Javier came from a specialized lab. Carlos knows which one, and he's covering its tracks." Javier closed his eyes, a wave of pain that wasn't physical washing over his face. Archero's expression didn't change, but a muscle in his jaw began to pulse. "Carlos has been with me for 12 years, Javier said, almost to himself. "And who has he been with for the last 6 months? Alina asked quietly. "Your brother's men found no shooter, no weapon. The attack was too clean. The poison required inside knowledge of Javier's schedule, his habits. The bullet was meant to finish the job and provide a simple, blamable cause. It's a script, and Carlos is following it." Archero leaned forward. "A script written by who?" "Who benefits from your war," Alina countered. "The Jalisco cartel gets blamed, you retaliate, the streets burn. But in the chaos, what happens? Territories get messy. Alliances shift. A trusted lieutenant who helped manage the conflict could rise very high in the aftermath, or be paid very well by a third party to ensure it happens." The theory hung in the antiseptic air. It was audacious. It was treason on a staggering scale. "Proof," Archero demanded. "I don't wage war on my brother's word or a homeless woman's hunch." Javier opened his eyes, a new sharpness in them. "The coastal lab. There are only 2 on the West Coast with the capability to refine marine toxins to that purity. One in San Diego, controlled by the Koreans. One in Santa Cruz, a boutique biotech firm called Nereus Sciences. It does contract work for pharmaceutical companies, and reportedly for anyone who can meet its price." "Nereus," Archero repeated, pulling out his phone. He typed a message, his thumbs moving with violent precision. "We'll see." For the next hour, the room was a tomb. Javier drifted into a medicated sleep. Archero stared at his phone, a statue of impending violence. Alina sat, every sense screaming that the walls were closing in. She'd lit a fuse, and now she was trapped in the room with the powder keg. Archero's phone buzzed. He read the message, his face turning to granite. He showed the screen to Javier, who had roused awake. Alina couldn't see the text, but she saw the last of the color drain from Javier's face. "Nereus Sciences," Archero said, his voice lethally quiet. "A shell corporation. The majority of its research funding for the last quarter came through a series of transfers from a holding company in Panama. That holding company is a known financial conduit for the Jalisco cartel." He looked at Alina. "But the security login for the contract management portal, accessed 3 days ago to confirm a special delivery, is registered to Carlos Mendez." The betrayal was now a matter of record. Carlos wasn't just covering up. He'd orchestrated the procurement of the very poison used. "He was always ambitious," Javier whispered, the hurt profound. "I thought it was for the family, for our empire." "His empire," Archero corrected, standing up. "The calm before the storm was over. He stays alive long enough to tell me who he's working with inside Jalisco. Then he feeds the crabs." He strode to the door and yanked it open. The hallway was empty. Carlos and the 2 men who had been posted were gone. A young, nervous soldier stood further down the hall. "Where is he?" Archero's voice was deceptively soft. The soldier stammered. He said you ordered a perimeter sweep of the garage level. He took Lopez and Herrera with him 10 minutes ago." Archero didn't curse. He turned back into the room, his mind working at terrifying speed. "He's running. He knows his access was traced." He pointed a finger at Alina. You come with me. You are now material evidence." Arturo, no, Javier said, struggling to sit up. She is not an asset, she is a guest, under my protection. Your protection is currently worth less than the paper on your discharge forms, Arturo shot back. Carlos knows she is the source of this revelation. He will try to eliminate her. The only place she is safe is where I can see her. We are leaving. Now. It wasn't a discussion. Two new men entered, their efficiency chilling. They helped Javier into a wheelchair, ignoring his protests. Another took Alina firmly by the arm. The procession moved swiftly down a private elevator to the basement, not to the main garage, but to a service bay where a nondescript medical transport van awaited. As they loaded Javier inside, Alina caught a glimpse of the main garage entrance. Two figures in dark clothes were moving purposefully toward the hospital doors, their postures all wrong for visitors. Carlos was cleaning up. The van pulled out into the gray morning. Arturo sat in the front passenger seat, constantly on his phone, orchestrating a city-wide hunt. Javier, in the back with Alina and a guard, was pale with pain and betrayal. "You were right," Javier said to Alina, his voice faint over the road noise. "I am sorry I doubted, even for a moment." "You trusted your brother. You trusted your right-hand man. That's not a flaw," Alina said, adjusting his blanket with a nurse's automatic touch. The action felt surreal amidst the chaos. They arrived not at a safe house, but at a luxury high-rise apartment in the financial district, a penthouse with panoramic views and a sterile, untouched feel. It was a fortress in the sky. Javier was settled into a master bedroom outfitted with more medical equipment than some clinics. Arturo held a war council in the living room, his captains appearing one by one, their reports grim. Carlos had vanished. His apartment was cleaned out. His bank accounts, the official ones, were emptied. He was a ghost. Alina was given a small guest room. She showered, the hot water feeling alien on her skin. She found clean clothes laid out, simple, expensive. When she emerged, a silent man led her to the living room. The captains were gone. Only the brothers remained. Arturo handed her a tablet. On it was a photo of a teenage girl with a bright, laughing smile, standing in front of a university sign. It was her daughter, Sophia. "How did you get this?" Alina's voice trembled. "It is my business to know things about people in my sphere," Arturo said, no apology in his tone. "She is safe. She lives in Portland with your sister. She believes you are working on an offshore oil rig, a noble if distant explanation for your absence." The invasion of privacy was total, but the confirmation of Sophia's safety was a balm she hadn't known she needed. "I can give you a new life," Arturo stated. "Documents, a job in a clinic far from here, enough money to never worry again, after we resolve this situation." It was a bribe, a generous, life-changing bribe, but it came with a string. "What do you want from me?" Javier's body is healing. His trust is shattered. He listens to you. He trusts your medical opinion. You will stay by his side. You will ensure his recovery. And you will tell me everything he says, everything he worries about. You will be my eyes on my brother's state of mind. Alina looked at Javier, who was watching from his wheelchair, his expression unreadable. She was being asked to spy on the man who had shown her the only genuine respect she'd known in years. "And if I refuse?" she asked. Arturo's smile was thin and cold. "Then you will walk out of this building with nothing but the clothes you wore from the hospital, and you will be dead before sunset. Carlos is not the only one who finds you a problem, Miss Vasquez. You are a witness to a conspiracy that could start a war. That makes you a liability to many powerful people. Your only value is your connection to my brother. Choose." The ultimatum hung in the opulent, silent room, the safety of a gilded cage or the freedom of a death sentence. Alina Vasquez, who had saved a life out of pure instinct, was now trapped in a game where every move was calculated, and every ally could be an enemy in disguise. She had uncovered a traitor, only to find herself traded from one captor to another. And outside, A city teetered on the edge of a war, with a missing lieutenant holding the match. Alina's answer was a silence Arturo chose to interpret as assent. He left the room, leaving her with Javier and the weight of the unspoken agreement. She turned to her patient, her voice low. "I won't report on you, but he's right about one thing. I'm a target now. So are you." Javier managed a weak smile. "Welcome to the family business, nurse." For 2 days, a tense routine set in. Alina monitored Javier's vitals, changed his dressings, and enforced rest. Arturo was a ghost, appearing only at odd hours to check on his brother, his eyes always lingering on Alina with cold assessment. She overheard fragments of his phone calls, mentions of border movements, Jalisco scouts, and a recurring, furious refrain: "Find him. I don't care how." Carlos had disappeared into the city's underbelly. On the third evening, a knock came at the penthouse door. Not the coded tap of a guard, but an uncertain, polite rap. The guard stationed inside peered through the peephole, then turned, bewildered. "It's a woman. Says her name is Dr. Anya Voss. She has credentials from Nerea Sciences." The name sent a jolt through the room. Javier and Alina exchanged a glance. Arturo, who had been staring at a bank of monitors, slowly rose. "Let her in." The woman who entered was in her 50s, dressed in a practical pantsuit, her hair in a severe bun. She carried a briefcase and an air of academic detachment that seemed utterly alien in the tense apartment. She ignored the armed men and looked directly at Javier. "Mr. Ruiz, I am Dr. Voss. I believe you have recently been exposed to a tetrodotoxin derivative synthesized by my lab." "You're brave to walk in here," Arturo said, his voice dripping with menace. "I am a scientist. My work was perverted. I'm here to correct the record," she replied, unflinching. She opened her briefcase and placed a file on the table. 6 months ago, Nerea Sciences was approached by an intermediary representing a biomedical research firm. They commissioned a study on the stability of tetrodotoxin in human plasma. The contract was legitimate, if unusually well-funded. The point of contact was a man named Carlos Mendez. She slid a photograph from the file. It showed Carlos in a suit, shaking hands with a man in a lab coat at what looked like a corporate event. He was charming, knowledgeable. He said he represented investors interested in novel anesthetics. "We delivered the refined toxin to a designated pharmaceutical courier. Standard procedure." "Then how did it end up in my brother?" Arturo demanded. "Because the courier was intercepted," Dr. Voss said, pulling out another document, a shipping manifest. "The delivery was hijacked en route to the storage facility. The security team was killed. The police report lists it as a robbery, but the toxin was the only thing taken. I began asking internal questions. My access was revoked. My lab was shut down for a safety review. That's when I started digging on my own." She pointed to a line on the manifest. "The intercept happened here at a truck stop off Interstate 5. It's a known neutral handoff point for several organizations, but the timing, it was too precise. The hijackers knew the route, the vehicle, the security detail. This was an inside job from the beginning. Carlos didn't just order the toxin. He arranged for it to be stolen to create deniability for the lab." The revelation reframed everything. Carlos wasn't just a traitor. He was a meticulous planner who had orchestrated a multi-layered crime, creating a false trail that led back to the Jalisco cartel via their financial conduit, while insulating his actual employers. "Who was he working for if not Jalisco?" Javier asked, his mind racing ahead of his weakened body. "That is the question," Dr. Voss said. "But consider, a war between Sinaloa and Jalisco would draw in federal attention, law enforcement resources, and military patrols. It would be a massive, costly disruption for both organizations. In the chaos, other, smaller factions could move in, or a larger, more centralized power could move to absorb the weakened remains." Arturo's phone buzzed. He read a message, and for the first time, Alina saw genuine shock on his face. He looked up. "Carlos has been spotted, not running. He's at the old warehouse district docks, and he's not hiding, he's meeting with someone. Who? Javier pressed. Archero's voice was hollow. Federal agents, DEA. The room exploded in a chorus of curses. The betrayal was deeper than cartel politics. Carlos was a rat, a federal informant. His plot wasn't just to spark a war. It was to orchestrate a mutually destructive conflict that would allow the authorities to decapitate both cartels in one fell swoop. The poison, the shooting, the frame job, it was all engineered to create the pretext for a massive, justified crackdown. They're not just trying to kill you, Javier, Elena breathed, the full horror dawning. They're trying to euthanize both your organizations, permanently. Archero was already in motion, barking orders into his phone. The penthouse became a hive of frantic activity. The plan was simple: intercept Carlos at the docks, take him alive, and extract every name, every detail of the federal operation. Javier grabbed Elena's wrist as she moved to follow the surge of men. You stay here. This is not your fight. Every person in this city who gets caught in the crossfire of this war is my patient, Javier, she said, pulling her arm free. I'm going. I might be the only one there who doesn't want more bloodshed. Against his brother's protests, Archero agreed. She has a point, a medical presence, in case things go wrong. His real reason was clear. She was still a hostage against her own good behavior. The convoy to the docks was a silent, armed procession. Elena rode in a van with Javier and 2 guards, her medical bag at her feet. The nighttime industrial zone was a maze of shadows and corrugated steel. They parked a quarter-mile from the Target warehouse, approaching on foot through a labyrinth of shipping containers. Through night vision binoculars, Archero watched the meeting. Carlos stood under a lone security light, talking calmly with 2 men in windbreakers, classic federal agent attire. They were handing him a folder. Now, Archero whispered into his radio. His men moved like ghosts, flanking the meeting point. But as they closed in, a new set of headlights speared the darkness. 2 black Suburbans with government plates roared into the open area, blocking the exits. More agents poured out, weapons drawn. It was a trap within a trap. Gunfire erupted, not from Archero's men, but from the rooftops, snipers targeting the federal agents. Chaos exploded. Carlos dove for cover behind a dumpster. The 2 agents he was meeting were cut down in the initial burst. Archero's team was caught in a kill box. They were pinned between the new federal reinforcements and the unknown snipers. It was a 3-way shootout. Elena and Javier were in a container alley, guarded by 2 men. A stray round ricocheted off the metal and 1 guard fell, clutching his thigh. Elena reacted on instinct, dragging him into cover, her bag already open. She applied a tourniquet, her hands steady despite the thunder of gunfire around them. Javier, pale and sweating, leaned against the container. They set us up. They knew we'd come. A figure staggered into their alley. It was Carlos, his shirt stained with blood not his own. He saw them, his eyes widening. He raised a pistol, aiming at Javier. Elena didn't think. She stepped between them, holding up her bloodied hands. Carlos, don't, he's your brother, you raised me, Javier shouted, his voice breaking. For a fraction of a second, Carlos hesitated. The hatred and fear in his eyes warred with a lifetime of loyalty. That second was all Archero needed. He emerged from the shadows behind Carlos and fired once. The bullet struck Carlos in the back of the shoulder, a non-fatal shot designed to disable. Carlos cried out, dropping the gun. Archero dragged him into the container alley as the firefight raged beyond. Who are the snipers? Archero demanded, pressing his gun to Carlos's temple. Carlos laughed, a wet, pained sound. You think you're the only one playing both sides. The Jalisco cartel hired their own mercenaries to make sure the meeting was secured. They don't trust their federal friends either. Everyone is betraying everyone, Archero. It's the end of our world. The scale of the deception was staggering. 3 forces were on the field: Archeros, the feds, and a Jalisco kill team, all hunting Carlos, all with different endgames. Archero made a decision. He hauled Carlos up. "We're leaving now." He looked at Alina and Javier. "Move." They ran, a desperate, limping dash through the container maze, bullets whining off the metal around them. They reached the vans. As they sped away, Alina looked back. The warehouse district was a panorama of flashing lights and muzzle flashes. The war had begun, not on the streets but in the shadows, a clandestine war of betrayal that was about to spill into the open. In the van, Carlos slumped against the wall, bleeding and defeated. Archero loomed over him. "You have one chance to live. You give me every name, every plan, every federal agent, every Jalisco contact, everyone." Carlos looked past him to Javier. "I'm sorry, Hermano, they had my son. They showed me pictures of him in his college dorm. They said they'd make it look like an overdose." He closed his eyes. "The operation is called Project Clean Slate. It's not just the DEA, it's a joint task force, FBI Homeland. They've been building this for 2 years. I was just a piece on the board." He then turned his head, his gaze landing on Alina with a strange, pitying clarity. "And you, nurse, you were never part of the plan. You were a random variable, but they know about you now. Your face is in their files. You're not a witness to a cartel war. You're a witness to a federal conspiracy to provoke one. That makes you the most dangerous person of all." The van fell silent except for the roar of the engine. Alina stared out at the fleeing city lights. She had set out to save a dying man. In doing so, she had stumbled into the center of a covert war where the lines between criminal and cop were utterly erased. Her value as a witness no longer just threatened cartels. It threatened the very authorities sworn to protect the city. There was nowhere left to run, and no one left to trust. The only way out was through the coming firestorm. The safe room was a clinical, windowless space lined with communications equipment and medical supplies. Carlos, patched up by a grim-faced Alina under Archero's watchful eye, sat handcuffed to a pipe. The brothers faced each other over a map of the city, the air electric with a new, cold purpose. "Project Clean Slate," Archero repeated, packing. "They want to use our war as justification for a militarized crackdown, mass arrests, asset seizures. They'll label us terrorists to get the funding, the jurisdiction." Javier, his color improving but his eyes haunted, traced a finger over the map. "They need a spark. My public assassination blamed on Jalisco. That's the spark. Carlos was to ensure it happened, then vanish into witness protection." "So we don't give them the spark," Alina said from the corner where she was organizing supplies. Both men looked at her. "You take away their pretext. You expose the plot before the war starts." Archero's laugh was harsh. "And who do we expose it to? The newspapers, the same agencies running the operation." "No," Alina said, her voice gaining strength. "You expose it to the other side, to Marco Jalisco." Silence filled the room. It was heresy, the ultimate risk. Javier was the first to understand. If Jalisco knows the federal task force is trying to provoke a war that will destroy him too, he becomes an ally of circumstance, a temporary one. He has his own rats to hunt. It turns their war into a joint problem. "It's a gambit," Archero breathed, his mind racing through the implications. "We hand Jalisco the head of the federal agent running Carlos, proof of the conspiracy. In return, we get a ceasefire, a united front against the real enemy." "And me," Carlos whispered from his corner. Archero turned to him, his expression devoid of mercy. "You are the proof. You will tell your story to Marco Jalisco's consigliere, every detail. Then you will disappear into a hole of my making, not theirs. Your son will be extracted from his dorm and placed somewhere safe. You will never see him again, but he will live. That is the only mercy you get." It was a brutal, pragmatic offer. Carlos, broken, nodded. The meeting with the Jalisco cartel was arranged through back channels, so encrypted they were nearly mythical. It took place not in a warehouse, but in the sterile conference room of a bankrupt tech startup, a neutral territory. Arturo and Javier went with 4 men. Marco Jalisco sent his brother Mateo, a shrewd man with a calculator for a heart. Alina was ordered to stay at the safe house. She ignored the order. Dressed in scrubs, carrying a medical bag, she presented herself as essential medical support for Javier. No one argued. The fiction was thin but useful. The meeting was tense enough to crack stone. Carlos, under the gaze of both cartels' leadership, recounted Project Clean Slate. He named his handler, a DEA supervisor named David Chase. He provided dates, drop points, the financial trail. Mateo Jalisco listened, his face impassive but his fingers tightened around his pen. When Carlos finished, Mateo spoke. "This Chase. He approached one of my lieutenants 6 months ago with an offer, information on Ruiz's shipments in exchange for leniency on a nephew's prison sentence. We refused. We thought it was a weak attempt at recruitment." He looked at Arturo. "It was not. It was a test, to see if we would play ball. When we didn't, we became part of the cleanup." The pieces snapped together. The federal operation had tried to turn both sides, to control the narrative from within. Failing that, they opted for chaos. An agreement was struck, sealed not with a handshake but with a mutual, silent understanding. An immediate public ceasefire. All territorial disputes frozen. Combined intelligence resources to identify and neutralize the federal task force's local assets. And Carlos would be placed in a joint custody black site until the threat was neutralized. For the next 72 hours, the city experienced a surreal peace. Street-level hostilities ceased. The usual drive-bys and retaliations vanished. Law enforcement, expecting escalating violence, was baffled. Meanwhile, the cartels became hunters. Using Carlos's information and their own vast networks, they identified safe houses, wiretap locations, and undercover agents. They didn't attack them. They exposed them, leaking addresses to rival gangs, tipping off internal affairs to suspicious bank transfers, creating a wave of bureaucratic and street-level chaos that swallowed Project Clean Slate's infrastructure whole. Alina watched from the periphery, tending to Javier's healing wound. She was now a fixture, a strange, respected neutral party in a world of killers. The end came for David Chase on a rainy Thursday, cornered not by cartel gunmen, but by 2 internal investigators from the Office of the Inspector General, acting on an anonymous, meticulously detailed dossier that landed on their desks. The dossier didn't come from the cartels. It came from Dr. Anya Voss, the scientist from Nereus, who had compiled her own evidence of the stolen toxin and the corrupted chain of custody. Alina had provided the final piece, the medical confirmation of the toxin's use, linking it definitively to the hijacked shipment. Chase was arrested for conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder. The public story was a rogue agent gone bad. The deeper truth was buried. Project Clean Slate was dismantled, its funding pulled, its personnel scattered. In the aftermath, the Ruiz penthouse felt different. The tension had bled away, replaced by a weary, watchful calm. Arturo summoned Alina to his study. "The threat is contained," he said, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey, offering her one. She declined. "You have a choice. The offer stands. New life, new identity far from here." "And if I choose to stay?" Alina asked. Arturo studied her. "Then you stay as what? A nurse, a reminder of a weakness." "As a guardian," Javier said from the doorway, leaning on a cane. He entered the room. "You see this city as patience. We see it as territory. Perhaps we need a doctor's perspective." He looked at his brother. "We have a charity. It funds clinics in poor neighborhoods. It is good for business, for our image. It is also poorly run. I would like Alina to run it, to make it actually mean something." It was a staggering offer. Power, purpose, and protection, all wrapped in a legitimate enterprise. "Why?" Alina asked, truly stunned. "Because you pulled me back from the dark," Javier said simply. "Not just from the poison, from the cynicism. You fought for a life when everyone else saw a pawn. This city is full of pawns. Maybe you can help some of them." Archero nodded, a rare gesture of agreement. The charity is real. The work would be real. You would have a salary, a home, security, and you would be visible, a public figure under our protection. It is harder to make a witness disappear when they are giving speeches at fundraisers. It was the ultimate safeguard, elevating her from a hidden liability to a public asset. Alina thought of her daughter, Sophia, in Portland. She could bring her here, give her a life, safety, a future. She thought of the countless nights in her car, feeling useless, discarded. Here was a chance to heal on a scale she'd never imagined. "I'll do it," she said. The final surprise came 2 weeks later, as Alina was moving into a secure apartment owned by the Ruiz family's holding company. A plain envelope was delivered by a courier. Inside was a single photograph and a note. The photograph showed Alina in her scrubs, applying pressure to Javier's wound on that first rainy night. It was taken from the spotter's angle. The note was typed. "Your intervention was noted. Your integrity is rare. Your new position is acceptable. Continue the work. We are watching." It was unsigned, but the paper was high-quality government stock. Alina understood. Her actions had been observed by more than just cartel spotters. A faction within the very agency she helped undermine had seen her, assessed her, and now, in their own cryptic way, granted her a form of permission. She was not just under the protection of the Ruiz family. She was, inexplicably, under the silent, distant watch of a power she could not name. She was safe precisely because she was useful to too many dangerous people. Alina Vasquez, the homeless nurse, had become the one person in the city that no one could afford to kill. She folded the note, placed it in a drawer, and looked out her new window at the city she had helped save from itself. The war had been averted. The peace was fragile, bought with secrets and blood, but it was peace, and she had a clinic to run. Alina's story echoes in the statistics we uncovered at the start. Nearly 1 in 10 direct healthcare workers lives below the poverty line. Over 13% face housing instability. These aren't abstract numbers. They are the real-life Alinas, the nurses and aides and technicians who hold your hand in the ER, who manage your chronic illness, who yet struggle to pay for their own roof or their next meal. Her journey from the street to a position of protected influence is a fictional extreme, but it illuminates a brutal truth. In our world, safety and value are often not granted by goodness or skill alone, but by utility to power. Alina became safe because she became useful to a cartel seeking legitimacy, to a hidden government faction seeking a controllable asset. Her medical oath, the very thing that made her vulnerable on the streets, became her armor in the halls of dangerous power. The lingering question is this: why must integrity be armored by danger? Why does a nurse's compassion only become bulletproof when it intersects with the self-interest of criminals and spies? The real heroes in our cities aren't in penthouses or safe rooms. They are in the understaffed clinics, the overcrowded emergency wards, the street medicine vans that park under bridges. They are the healthcare workers who clock out and go home to insecure housing, to pantries that are too empty, all while carrying the emotional weight of a society's suffering. Alina Vasquez's fictional peace was brokered with secrets and threats. The peace we need in reality must be built on something more solid, on valuing care work not just with applause but with living wages, with mental health support, with the basic dignity of a secure home. The next time you see a medical professional, remember, they are the first line of defense in any crisis, personal or pandemic. What does it say about us if we let that line live on the edge of collapse? This is the hidden triage of our modern world. Who do we save? And who do we, by silence and inaction, allow to bleed out? The story of the homeless nurse and the cartel's brother is over, but the real story, the one happening in your city right now, is still being written. What will your chapter say? If you found this dive into the shadows where mercy and power collide compelling, make sure you're subscribed. We're just getting started.